Now, this show is called The Other Side, which means we bring you different viewpoints. And there appears to be a lot more history behind what's going on here than simply Putin invaded Ukraine unprovoked in 2022. We know the Biden family were involved in questionable activity in Ukraine thanks to Hunter's laptop and his unusual board position on a Ukrainian gas company. We know that they tried to use a Ukraine story to impeach President Trump during his first term, accusing Trump of having had an inappropriate phone call with Zelensky. The Democrats claimed that Trump had asked Zelensky in that call to investigate the suspicious Biden activities, which actually was totally okay. But they allege that Trump was implying that he wouldn't back further arms funding to Ukraine if Zelensky didn't investigate, that there was some kind of quid pro quo. Remember that? And the Democrats allege that that was not okay. Trump vehemently denies that that was ever implied in that perfect phone call. The impeachment, though, over such a trivial distinction was really suspicious. And it was a very good way for the Democrats to take the focus off the Biden story and put it onto Trump, and the American old media, of course, happily complied. And they wonder why nobody trusts them or watches them now. Well, someone who's got a very different take on the Ukraine situation is a little bit more sympathetic to Russia than me, I've got to say. I am very much anti-Putin and very much anti all sorts of leftism, socialism, communism and dictatorship, so I'm no fan of Putin whatsoever, but there is another side to this story and we do want to bring it to you. This man has been studying the history of this crisis for some time. He knows it well. He's a smart guy. He's former federal Liberal MP, George Christensen. George posted a thread on X this week following the Trump-Zelensky White House incident, and the thread has so far received something like 17 million views worldwide. And he's subsequently been speaking with media in the UK and abroad. And George Christensen joins us now. Thanks, George, for your time.
Thank you very much, Damien.
So, George, the essence of your post on X, your thread on X, was basically that this war didn't pop out of nowhere. It wasn't just a case of Vladimir Putin in an unprovoked way invading another country, that there's a lot of history that went down beforehand, not justifying in any way the action, but at least providing some background context to it that we should probably understand. Can you, in as brief a way as possible, just take us through that background?
Yeah, look, very quickly, obviously people want to simplify this as Russia bad, Ukraine good. It is far from that. It's much more complicated, as most things are. I could go back to sort of ancient history, how Kiev was the home of the Rus people that eventually become the Russian people, how intertwined Ukraine and Russia are. I mean, the name Ukraine itself, Ukraine as a nation is a modern invention. It was always called the Ukraine. And the word Ukraine in Slavic actually is borderlands. So it was the borderlands of Russia. The distance sort of as Russia sort of faded out and the West began. And that's where a lot of these issues are today. If you look to modern history, the eastern part of Ukraine, an area called the Donbass, which roughly covers these provinces called Luhansk and Donetsk. You might have heard of them on the news. Well, let's go to 2014. Now, that's only 11 years ago. And what happened there is that the provincial governments in Donetsk and Luhansk, that area known as the Donbass, they decided that they no longer wanted to be part of Ukraine because the Ukrainian government tried to crack down on everything Russian. These people that live there are ethnically Russian and culturally Russian. So they took great offense to it.
Yeah. I have heard this before. I've also heard the opposite. I've also heard that there's a substantial number of people that see themselves as Ukrainian, don't want to not be part of Ukraine anymore. It's a bit of a Northern Ireland, Scotland sort of situation, I guess, that you've got that divided feeling. But the separatists, I guess, there was a separatist movement, like a full-on separatist movement?
By far, I don't know that any rational geopolitical observer would say that by far, and I do mean by far, the majority of people that live in that area feel ethnically and culturally Russian. Now, they tried to overthrow, as in Kiev tried to overthrow the provincial governments there. They rebelled. It was seen as a renegade or a revolutionary sort of movement, to separatist movement. And what ended up happening is that the government in Kiev actually started firing missiles into these areas, started shooting people. And there's reports.
Seriously?
You can go and have a look at a report on CNN from 2014 talking about how there was indiscriminate shelling of civilians and authorities and government institutions in that area alike. And so that goes back to 2014.
Like, I think we've got some of that. We've got some of that video from CNN. I think you provided that in your thread, George. So we might just take a quick look at that now. This is a story from CNN in 2014. So we're not talking a right-wing outlet by any stretch of the imagination, but talking about this, or reporting on this actual shelling of the eastern Ukrainian regions, those breakaway separatist regions, by Kiev, by the government of Ukraine in the capital in 2014. Let's have a quick look at some of that.
Petro Poroshenko will have a hard time winning back hearts and minds in this city. As the people of Donetsk sweep up the debris of their homes and livelihoods, they are hardened against a president they say is killing his own people. We are Ukrainian, but they kill us, this man says. So we probably need our own country, because these people in Kiev, they are not brothers for us. The shells hit these homes days ago, but the tears are still fresh. 2 people were killed outside this block of flats last Wednesday. One of them was a 50-year-old woman, the other a 34-year-old woman. Her husband, who won't talk to us, he says he's in shock, managed to make it down to the cellar with their little child, but she just didn't have the time. And this is a story that repeats itself over and over in dozens of apartment blocks, with civilians being killed by the constant shelling around Donetsk.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing stuff, George. And I think it certainly sheds a light on the complexity here, right? It's not as simple as everybody would like to think.
And, after all of that, there was referendums. Now you can dispute referendums. They can always be disputed in terms of their authenticity and how solid and secure they were. Nonetheless, we've got figures of like 98% wanting to cede from Ukraine. Now, even if it was inflated substantially, you'd have to say that at 98%, it's still a strong majority that would have voted for. And look, I hear the arguments that, you can't rely on that. Well, if that's the argument, let's send in the UN, let's send in whoever it might be, NATO, to actually oversee a referendum in that area to see whether those people in those provinces want to remain with Ukraine or want to go to Russia. I would be willing to bet a large amount that even a referendum held by NATO would show that the vast majority want to go to Russia. And so that brings into question sovereignty. And, there's a lot of talk about sovereignty. Russia has invaded Ukraine. But actually what's happened is that those provincial governments, renegade governments that Ukraine would call them, have actually invited Russia in for protection because they feared that they were going to get annihilated.
We've got a situation now where Russia holds the Donbass, right? Most of it.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
And it doesn't look like they'll be giving it back.
They won't be giving it back. So the only way forward for peace, and this could have been sorted out in only about a month or two after it started.
Before 1 million young men died.
Before 1 million young men died, before a lot of Ukraine was reduced to rubble. We had the Istanbul Accords, peace discussion that happened between Russian authorities and Ukrainian authorities. And the reality was they were both about to sign the dotted line. And then the West got involved. Then Boris Johnson started telling them, don't sign. And they didn't sign. So it was abandoned at the last minute because of Western pressure. And you know what? A deal will be done, and it'll probably be done very soon by the looks of tweets or posts on X that are coming out from Zelensky at the moment, and what Donald Trump is saying. And that deal will be almost exactly the same as the Istanbul Accords. So you've got to ask yourself, why the hell have we sent so many young men into the meat grinder there in Eastern Europe? And it's all for nothing.
It's horrific. So what was the motivation for Europe? I mean, it's basically about containment of Russia, and wanting, obviously, over-optimistically wanting regime change in Russia, which, unfortunately, as evil as Putin might be, He's powerful, nasty and powerful, and can resist and has the ability to resist
Well, I think
that sort of pressure.
That's blown up in their faces, because probably if anything, when a country goes to war, and it's sort of pitting us versus them, people normally get behind the leader, and I think that's probably only consolidated his position there in Russia. And look, it has to be that. It has to be a matter of trying to screw Russia down and in hope that Ukraine would become their Vietnam or something like that. But that right. hasn't happened. And can I just add one thing? If we're saying that, no, we'll take what NATO and the West saying, Western leaders are saying at face value about, it's bad that Russia has invaded this territory. Let me talk to you about a little something called Kosovo, where Kosovo was a province of Serbia. Kosovo wanted to separate. Serbia started bombing Kosovo. NATO stepped in at Kosovo's request and protected them and started shooting at Serbians. So how is that situation any different to what Russia has done? It's really bizarre, and that's why I say this whole situation is very complex. There's a lot of hypocrisy in it, but at the end of the day, this was all about trying to screw Russia down, and I think it's failed. And I think we've, as I said, million people probably just lost their lives all for nothing.
Well, more than 17 million views your tweet thread has got, so I urge people to go and have a little bit of a read of that if they want to learn a little bit more. We're going to take a break right now, George. We need to just quickly take a break. We'll come back, and I want to get your thoughts when we get back on that Oval Office meeting and just where you think things have gone since and where they will end up. Stay with us.
The other side doesn't get more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money to bring you news from a centre-right perspective like the ABC does to bring you news from a left-wing perspective. In fact, we don't get a red cent from the government. We need voluntary donors and supporters like you to keep going and growing. And we hate asking for charity, so we've done a deal with what we think is the world's best VPN, virtual private network service. It'll keep you and your family truly safe without slowing down your internet speeds, and you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. And you can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and get more info. That's piavpn.com/otherside. That was a segment from a recent episode of our fortnightly news commentary show, The Other Side, with me, Damien Curry. If you liked it, support us. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube right now so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free. Just click that subscribe button and the little bell. And check out our Other Side Unplugged show too, and join our mission to actually do something and change Aussie media for the better at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out now.